Thank you so much, Mark, and good morning once again, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you at Connected Africa, and my name is Moses Kemibaro, the founder and CEO of Dotsavvy. It's an honor to moderate this important discussion on safeguarding growth and building resilience, the future of Africa with AI and the impact of cybersecurity. As we stand at the crossroads of a digital revolution, as we are seeing in the conversations that have already been had, our continent is uniquely poised to harness the power of artificial intelligence to drive innovation, economic growth, resilience in our cybersecurity networks. So today we're joined by a distinguished panel of leaders and experts who share their insights and strategies on how Africa can navigate the complexities of this digital age, ensuring that our growth is both sustainable and inclusive. And I'd like to start off by introducing our panelists. We have unfortunately lost a couple of our panelists, but we do have a fairly large number still. Starting off with Honorable Waweru John Kiarie, the chair of the ICT committee. Please give him a hand as he joins us. Karibu sana. We also have with us Saleh Al-Nemer, the regional CT and distinguished technologist from HP Enterprise. Karibu sana, Saleh. Kelvin Mugambi, the cybersecurity technical solutions architect, Sub-Saharan Africa at Cisco. Imran Chaudhrey, country manager for East Africa Network Business Security at Fortinet. And lastly, from the Kenya ICT Authority, the Director of Shared Services, Michael Odhiambo. Welcome. Thank you very much.
Great to have you, Karibu.
So good morning to all our panelists. So to get us started off, I'd like to ask a question that all of you can answer. And briefly, can you share what you believe the single most impactful step your country, organization, or sector has taken to contribute to a safer and more innovative digital landscape in Africa when integrating AI and enhancing cybersecurity? Please highlight any specific initiatives or achievements that exemplify this effort. And I think I'd like to start this off with Mheshimiwa Waweru John Kiarie. Maybe you can give us your perspective from a Kenyan government point of view. What have we done in this area?
Well, thank you very much, Moses. And I would start by first welcoming everybody to Nairobi, Kenya. And secondly, to congratulate the organizers of this event for putting up such an amazing platform for conversation for Africa on tech and for times such as this. To my mind, the biggest achievement so far by Kenya government is to set out the master plan, the overarching thinking, and especially being powered from the highest office in the land, where the president has taken it upon himself to be the champion for the Kenyan digital superhighway. The effect of this is already being felt. The digital superhighway, in a nutshell, is the concept where Kenya is imagining and already actioning on the laying out of hundreds of thousands of kilometers of fiber around the country in the next few years, planning to set up Wi-Fi hotspots, 25,000 of them in public areas. We are talking about markets, small termini, matatu stages, and so on. It is also seeking to do something extremely ambitious, which is the setting up of 1,450 digital innovation hubs around the country. And 1,450 is an amazing number, is a magical number, because this is the number of the lowest administrative unit in Kenya. The ward forms the constituencies, constituencies form counties, and these counties together form the country. So you can imagine a digital innovation hub being put up in every single village of this country. Now, as it is happening, because we won't wait for the tail end of this vision to be able to start enumerating the successes. When you think about it, in just the last 1 year, the digitization of government services now close to 20,000 government services already onboarded onto digital platforms in itself is an achievement. When you think about the youth who are already training in the already existing digital innovation hubs and the amazing things that they are doing around innovation, around modeling new thinking, but even more so, even contributing to the earnings personally and for their families and for their communities, because some of these young people in very far-flung areas around the country are already earning from digital jobs at these innovation hubs, so that even as we are creating more digital hubs, we are already taking advantage of already existing centers like the technical and vocational training institutes are becoming centers for these digital innovation hubs. And as we speak right now, so many of these digital innovation hubs are either at some stage of completion or completed and already operating. So there are many things that you can speak about around what would that one achievement be. But to my mind, I would imagine it starts with the idea. Then the idea is formalized into a master plan, a blueprint that can be followed as the Bible. Of course, there's going to be malleability to allow and maneuverability to allow for changes as you roll out. But I believe that this is one of the biggest achievements that the Kenya government has done. Personally, I represent a constituency, the Dagoretti South constituency, and we are seeing tech in so many ways as you are attending to matters, public matters and engaging with publics. But the biggest one for us at the Dagoretti South constituency is something that I'm so proud to always speak about. We are currently the only constituency in Kenya that has a comprehensive school feeding program, where today, as we speak right now, we are serving close to 22,000 lunches to all the public primary schools in the constituency and a number of secondary schools. Now, what does lunch have to do with technology? The concept that we have applied in the Dagoretti South constituency is a hub and spoke model that allows for us to have a central kitchen at Mokarara Primary School, out of where we are cooking these lunches, and then we have a logistical enterprise that is the spokes leading to the different primary schools. But all this is also centered around technology, because each and every single child who will be having lunch today at the Dagoretti South constituency has an armband that they are wearing. And this armband is the meal card. So you can imagine 22,000 young children are already generating data that is extremely useful, even as we make decisions going forward. The technology on the armband is co-developed. I have to do this shout out. Is co-developed between Food for Education, who are our operating partner, Safaricom, and Cisco. Have been able to develop this armband meal card that is practically being used in the Dagoretti South constituency today as we speak. Now you can imagine the next level of this development. With all this data, many decisions can be made, including the health and the status of the child, the situation at home where they come from, because we saw when we started the program, some children would come with plates to school. But over time, we saw them coming with containers that could be lidded, meaning that this child is coming from a place where this is probably the only meal they will have in the day. And so they take the 300 grams of food that we are serving them. They will probably consume 100 grams, but they remember that they've got siblings at home, and they pack this food and go home with it. So to my mind, the biggest achievement so far is the visioning as a country coming together to vision around this whole idea of the digital superhighway in Kenya. Thank you, Moses.
Thank you so much, Mheshimiwa. I think what you've shared with us is really the sense of inclusivity. And yeah, give him a hand, please. And really the breadth of the different initiatives that are underway that are having such a big impact across all of Kenya and, of course, in your constituency. Saleh, I'd like you to maybe share with us also from your perspective, what have been some of the big impactful initiatives that you've seen from the organization in this context?
So we're talking about multiple elements. So when we talk about technology rollout like this, we see things from three different areas: people, technology, and economics. So how we can provide an affordable technology that is can be, let's say, spread out across large region. The second thing is how we make sure that education of the people and the curriculums for these technologies to be distributed to the people in ease and quickly. The third thing is how we make sure morally that we have the right access to the right technology when we need them. And when we put all this together, it become multiple programs, multiple initiatives that we can provide and support. On the other hand, we look into how we can help the economy and from the customer perspective from outside to adopt these new technologies and then work with them to create new intuitive technologies or solutions that help them to do things in a much better way, in a much faster way.
Fantastic. I think I'd like to shift to Michael. Michael, maybe you can also give us a perspective from the ICT Authority. What are some of these impactful initiatives that we're seeing have a significant impact on the country?
Yeah, thank you. I think first and foremost, I'd like to just echo what was mentioned earlier. The fact that in government, there's this Kenya National Digital Master Plan. And that master plan, I think there are two things in there that I really want to echo out. There's cybersecurity, which is a cross-cutting theme. And then there's also emerging technologies. And there are a number of pillars we have in there, some infrastructure, digitization, and all that. But these two themes around cybersecurity being a cross-cutting theme in emerging tech is from the fact that AI would then borrow across. We put emerging tech, or rather AI to fall under emerging tech because everything that we want to do and that we are doing is then factored in there. I'll start with the cybersecurity part. I think one of the greatest steps that was done by government is when in 2019, or rather the Data Privacy Act of 2019 came into play. That then helps to protect user data, and I think as of 2020, that was operationalized, and we have the Data Protection Office. And I think a lot of the people in Kenya have seen how effective that is becoming with a few compliance issues coming up. So that then begins to prepare the journey for AI and the use of AI, because as it was mentioned earlier, there are people who are afraid of AI because one of the aspects therein is data and how private that data is. So I think the other thing that's important is what other use cases, because there are certain solutions and services after COVID that became very prevalent. For example, there has been more data-based solutions and people going online to make payments, and therefore the need for security has become heavy. Government then, as you heard, has done quite a lot in digitizing services and moving them to the over 19,000 services that we talked about. That has then brought a very big impact from a human-centric service perspective. Having more than 2.6 million transactions a month in this 19,000 services is quite something, and we are then now seeing the possibilities of using AI to do useful data analysis and research to make useful decisions in government. So I think those are the things that I'd like to add. Maybe just to also point out something, in Connected 2023, that was last year, I think we had a session on AI, and I had shared an experience because there's a private group that's doing OpenAI with whom we had been trying to do a few things, and we had done some online meetings, and I think I wanted to bring out, to showcase the fact that AI is heavily based on learning, and what you give it is what it displays. And I think I talked about this meeting that I attended, and I was the only person from Africa, and there were 3 other people from other jurisdictions, and I think then using the camera, we'd all do a test, and then it would recognize us. And I think as at that time of that meeting, for me, it said object not found, okay? So it was object not found because then I was different then. But we had a meeting, and we did the same test in November of last year. So this time, the camera then was able to find me, and it picked out. So what it does is when it identifies you, it goes online to see where else you do exist. So it pulled up this LinkedIn profile of myself and a few other places I appear. But something then happened, and something that's common in Africa. We had a blackout in the course of this meeting. And I think just to prove this further, things then became different, because then one of the people in the panel then said, why don't we try and see what happens? What I did not know is on the camera, what they would see on their end were 2 white eyes and white teeth. And you do not know, I mean, it was very interesting, because the outcome of that search was that this animal is found in Sarabwe forest. In short, he just described me to be a gorilla. And then it goes to prove that there's still a lot that we need to do for AI and learning that matrix, so that then it can be useful for us, both in government and in private sector. So I think what I'm just trying to say is that there's a lot of stereotype that needs to be managed, and also government is also working on trying to get a policy around the safe use of AI, so that even as government is pushing the agenda for AI, it also then guides both private sector and government to make effective use of AI. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I mean, it's so clear that AI needs to be much more inclusive, and indeed, we need to explore building our own unique models that are contextually relevant, but most importantly, accurate. Thank you for sharing that. Imran, I'd like to hear your point of view, given that you work at Fortinet. Looking at cybersecurity in terms of some of the key impact points, because with digital transformation comes this additional risk area around cybersecurity, where we are suddenly more open and more at risk to threats. Could you give us your point of view from Fortinet in terms of what some of the key impact areas that you have seen from your point of view? Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you, Moses. Firstly, I want to point out that as Kenya, there's been a significant leap and bound in terms of how technology is being adopted. I was just sitting here and thinking about myself. I was here in Kenya in 2005. This is when I moved to Kenya. And the first thing I did was change my UK driving license to the Kenyan Red Book. And that little red book had a way of leaving red colors on your shirts everywhere you went. December, my 18-year-old gets a driving license. And it was one of the busiest times for us at Fortinet. So I kept saying, Saleh, I will find time to sit down and do this. So just to get rid of her, I gave her the link to eCitizen. The young lady, within an hour, had everything done and dusted. And she only came back to my desk for one reason. Baba, I need M-Pesa. And I took her to the NTSA office in Upper Hill the other day, and I have never seen a more excited human being, simply because she has a new driving license now. So you can see how, in 2005, I was standing in a queue and waited 2 months for the Red Book, and how, fast forward, you have an 18-year-old who didn't even need my supervision, and I only asked her to check her spellings, because these 18-year-olds have no patience, they can type anything quickly. And voila, she has a driving license. So the biggest challenge that we're posing here today is we are adopting technology very quickly to drive transformation, innovation, and the ability to deliver services to our users through mobile devices. And what's happening now is we're now becoming custodians of huge amounts of data. We now have to handle this data. We have to process this data. We have to deliver this data to everyone accessing these technology platforms. And what's happening is we are starting to see a shift in how, especially in government, is starting to think about cybersecurity. 5 years ago, when we were driving Fortinet in East Africa, cybersecurity was not a priority. But today, when I sit with various ministries, departments, and agencies, the first question we get asked is, how safe are we? And when we run a quick Q&A with them, we find there's lots of gaps that need to be filled out. One of the biggest challenges and problems that we face in East Africa, especially in Kenya, is we still have a huge gap in skill set. So cybersecurity is not something that was mainstream in terms of education. Last week I was presenting at the Aga Khan Health Tech Day. And I asked the caregivers in that room, I said, how many of you are running the Aga Khan Hospital? And 6 of them put their hands up. I said, did any of you do cybersecurity in any education program during your learning period? And they all said no. I said, but you're running one of Kenya's biggest hospitals. And we discussed how they had a huge challenge in cybersecurity. So we have a global East Africa-Kenya gap when it comes to people with the right skill set to drive cybersecurity. And this is what is slowing down innovation and adoption of technology across.
Well, thank you so much for that. And finally, we come to Kelvin. Kelvin, I think you and I earlier were reminiscing. I was reminiscing about Cisco from the early part of my career when I worked in the internet, service provision space. And I think we talked a little bit about how that space has evolved so much, especially with, again, the issues of cybersecurity and also digital transformation. Can you share your point of view from a Cisco perspective in terms of the key impacts that you've had as an organization in this area? I think, yeah, you can use the other mic. Okay.
Thank you for that. So as Cisco, we've been collaborating a lot, especially with the public sector, to bring them up, to empower citizens, and to have this cybersecurity education. I'm just being free for all. So there's a country digital acceleration program that Cisco has signed with the government. And as a result of that, we are opening the Cybersecurity Experience Center. It's a one-of-a-kind security center in Kenya. So what this helps you do is that for students and for anybody interested in getting into cybersecurity, you can actually go to an environment where Cisco has set everything up. You can get Cisco experienced people to train you on cybersecurity, and you can get people to guide you. This is opening on Friday, and it's one of several, we call them edge centers, that are opening everywhere in Africa. So we have another one coming up in Rwanda. And the good thing with this is that we want to drive cybersecurity empowerment and education at the lowest levels. So if you can start in schools, then you can get upskilled, and we have a huge skills shortage, as most of the panelists have mentioned. So we need to fill that skills shortage, and Cisco is doing that to help with skills shortage. Thank you.
In fact, I think I attended a cyber conference not too long ago, and I think there was a ratio of, one cybersecurity expert to 1 million Africans. Is that correct? Something that ridiculous?
Yes, I don't have the exact numbers, but ISC2 estimates that by 2030 there'll be a shortage of over 3 million security professionals. And these are required. As Imran has said, they're required in every sector. The healthcare industry is the sector that's most impacted by ransomware threats. So even that needs to be considered.
So basically, we're saying it's a good career opportunity.
It's a good career opportunity. You get to help people, and if you can make money doing it, then why not?
Fantastic. Yeah. I'd like to come back to Mheshimiwa. And really, as the chair of the ICT committee, what are your views on the current regulatory environment for both AI and cybersecurity in Kenya? I think that carries on nicely from Kevin's point of view. What is the current state of the regulatory environment when it comes to AI and also cybersecurity in Kenya?
Thank you very much, Moses, and a critical question. You saw the presentations that were made in the lead up to this panel, and it was Hani, when he was presenting just before Tupi, who actually, I can't tell whether it was Hani or Tupi, in his presentation was talking about how AI is developing in Africa. And in one of the slides, he was talking about countries that are taking strides towards developing and deploying AI. And he mentioned about Kenya being among the few African countries that has been able to develop a robust data protection law. I was honored, and I must say so, to have sat in the first parliamentary committee on communication, information, and innovation. Previously, this sector was taken as part of other bigger sectors. So for example, in Parliament, there was never a committee specific to ICT. The ICT was part of the Energy Committee. But in 2013, when I joined Parliament, we were among the first members of Parliament to sit in the Committee on Communication, Information and Innovation. And in the last term, we were able to develop the Kenya Privacy and Data Protection Bill, which in itself did a lot of things. Over and above setting the laws, we were able to set up the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner. And you can see where that now sits in terms of data protection. There's a component of cybersecurity there. There's also a component of regulating AI. It was also in this committee that we have been able to develop the Kenya Computer Misuse and Cybercrime Law, which in itself was lauded as one of the better laws in the continent on cybersecurity. But the regulatory and legislative and policy environment is still very, very nascent. And in fact, the challenges are seeming bigger than even the solutions that we are offering. However, this will call for innovative thinking in how we make laws, because traditionally, parliaments have the habit of, let me use this word cautiously, of over-legislating, where you over-prescribe on a certain issue. But the learnings that we are getting as we are working in this legislative space is that going forward, there will be need for innovative lawmaking. Lawmaking that hits the sweet spot, where you're not suppressing innovation, but at the same time, you are regulating a space. And to my mind, that kind of law will have to do two things. One, new laws in technology will have to take advantage of already existing laws. When you think about something like cybercrime, where someone is probably pilfering from people using online devices, you can fall back to the penal code, because ultimately it is theft. Someone has stolen. So the penal code can suffice, and if it doesn't suffice, it can be fortified. So much so that you won't need a specific law for that very specific crime that you want to punish. Secondly, laws will have to be a bit more overarching in their design. So much so that you set the broader parameters without the need of prescribing, as I said earlier. So the regulatory space and the legislative and policy space is still extremely nascent. It's calling upon those of us who are in places where these decisions are being made to also fast track the speed at which these laws are being made. But more importantly, it is also to sensitize, so that even as the laws are being made, they become largely acceptable by all the publics. There are developers involved. There are tech minds that are involved. There are users that are involved. There are bigger audiences of civil society and the general public at large. So to my mind, we as Kenya are taking the necessary steps, probably not at the pace that we would want to, but still taking a leading role, especially in the region and in the continent. To my mind, we will always be having the problem of legislation, of laws, policies, and regulation always playing catch-up to technology. That one will always be there. The level at which people are developing, are inventing, are innovating, legislation and its incumbent bureaucracies will not be able to be at par or ahead of that, but there is a good place for catching up. And to give a perfect example, at this summit, M-Pesa has been mentioned severally. And we all know that the legislation and the regulations around M-Pesa had to come after the fact. And chances are, as it was said here in an earlier panel, chances are, if there had been laws before the deployment of M-Pesa, probably they would have stifled the innovation or slowed it down. But M-Pesa was deployed, and then we, as the people, now had to decide what is it that we would need to build around this innovation to make it safe and user-friendly.
No, absolutely, I agree with you. I concur that Kenya has often had a light touch in certain regulations that have allowed the flourishing of things like mobile money, M-Pesa, and others. And obviously, the Data Protection Act has been hugely significant in giving people a sense of comfort when they're using data platforms and as we go through the era of digital transformation. I'd like to come back to you, Saleh. And from your perspective at HPE, what are the critical components of a resilient cybersecurity infrastructure for Africa?
Great question. Thank you so much for the question.
Yeah.
So when we look into the cybersecurity and how we can protect the environment, we look into things from 5 different perspectives. First thing, when manufacturing. So when we manufacture new devices or new components, we want to make sure that security is embedded in this manufacturing. And when we ship it from the factory to the data center, we want to make sure that these systems are not tampered, especially when we look into the logistics and all that stuff. So what we do, basically, we add in the same machine, we add some sort of sensors. So if the machine has been tampered with before it reaches that center, it will not power up. So, and if you have to go back to the team, on our support team, to make sure that the system has not been tampered, or there's no harm to use that platform. The second layer, basically, we develop something we call Silicon Root for Trust, which is in the machine level, in the motherboard level, we have something malware, let's say, application architecture that understand the coding of the what executing the processor. And if that code is suspicious, the system will flag it as part of the security SME platform. And this sits in all our servers, by the way. The third thing we have partnership with the processor manufacturers, where we provide security on the processing level. So something we call CSGX, secure, let's say, coding and programming on the motherboard level, which means we segregate the application processing from the OS processing. So you can run an application with the secure data requirement, and that application will pass by the operating system, do the processing at the processor level, and come back and give you the results. The fourth thing with basically, we do something called compute ops. So compute ops is our centralized operation center. So we can have an operation center or a platform that sits in a data center or in a city that can control and look into all these use cases from the servers that's connected to it. So you can have centralized operation, control, and management from one umbrella. So this is from the compute aspects. Let's go to the data storing and data storage aspects. So in storage perspective, things has been developed in a very high way. In a sense of, today we look at encryption, but also we look at on-fly and on-rest encryption as well. So I can process data that has been encrypted and decrypted on the source when I need them, which means if I copy this data or put it somewhere else, it won't be, let's say, usable. And that runs also on the storage platforms natively in the storage ecosystem by itself. The third thing is the data protection, the cybersecurity of business continuity itself. So when we look at cybersecurity attacks, we don't look into the loss of the data, or we don't look into the action of what happened. What we regret is what after we restore back the environment, how much we lost and how much time we took to get us there as well. So this was the main challenge. So what we did, we incorporated technology we called Zerto, which will give you the capability to have, let's say, some sort of a continuous recovery of your environment. And you can go back to almost the second of before the attack, and you just lose whatever happened after that. Now, the beauty of this technology, we actually can go back within minutes. So even if you have terabytes of data, we can restore you back in minutes. In actually one of the cases, we restored 20,000 virtual machine data in less than 8 minutes. And that's just to show how resilient that we were trying to achieve. So, and all that as well, we look into partners all the time. We try to partnership with ecosystems around us to make sure we can provide that kind of impact to the community as maximum as we can and benefit them from the technology.
Oh, thank you for that. Clearly, it's not a straightforward process, and I imagine those best practices are still probably a work in progress in many markets, right?
So there's a lot of, let's say, best practices. However, as the gentleman mentioned, that there is different, let's say, case for each one of these actions. And you want to make sure that we don't create an overcomplicated environment. We want to make it easy, especially today with an AI, let's say, world that we have. Bad guys are using AI to do bad things as well. So how we can prevent or distinguish between this is a harmful action or educational action, and how we can take that and then build a framework based on these requirements by itself.
All right, thank you so much. I'm told we're a little bit strapped for time, so Michael, I'll come to you now. Michael, I'd like to hear from you around your role in terms of being in charge of the Director of Shared Services. Where are we right now as a country when it comes to incorporating AI in government services? And I know the caveat is what you mentioned earlier to me, which is we work within frameworks, and sometimes these lag behind what we'd call the latest innovations or trends. But that being said, are we moving? Is something happening? Please share your perspective.
Yeah, thank you. So allow me to use a different, and just following up on the fact that technology goes ahead sometimes, ahead of frameworks and policies. I'll take on cybersecurity, the PKI, National Public Key Infrastructure, which is something that we have done as government. This is something that was not clearly legislated. But then as government, we went ahead, implemented the public key infrastructure. And now the net effect is that we are not only just beginning to roll it out in government, but now we are getting conversations within the region where we are supposed to have a signing key across, Kenya, Rwanda, and the neighboring countries, so that then we can have an East African situation. But then herein, we have a solution, we have something that's working, and now we have legislation following up, then so that then it is properly anchored. Now, using that example, and I go to AI, we have two specific use cases where we have chatbots for specific government websites, the BRS, Business Registration Services, and the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner. So if you went to those websites, you'll find that there's chatbots there, then they're trying to use both English and Swahili. And the other reason for this is we are also trying to look at accessibility, for persons who are challenged. Sometimes we use the word persons with disabilities or persons who are challenged, so that then they can get a way of still enjoying these services like any other person would. Now, the thing is, trying to take it further and put the African context into it, I think there's a trial we are doing with the business registration services to see how to model mother tongue as well, so that our people back in the rural areas can also try and interact with this technology and try and make sense of it. Because remember, there are some of our users out there, because as government we focus on delivering services, and now we have taken these services onto the digital platform. The question is, how many of them understand English? How many understand Swahili? Many of them have gone through an education setup that is rural-based in a rural language. So trying to make this AI solutions using a chatbot, bringing the service closer to them is one thing, but then someone else said, can my grandmother understand how to use this service? So translation into, I know there's a trial of doing this in Luo, and that is something that's still ongoing, to see if then the people who are there can interact with this and still get the result that me and you would get in using this service. So I think that then shows some of the steps we have made. Of course, legislation is there, but then taking the bold step of just pushing the agenda, making a difference in the solutions out there. I think lastly, I want to talk about, I mentioned e-citizen service with the over 2.6 million average transactions a month, giving the country about $80 million in a month just out of that service. Now, we realize there's data growing every day, and it's growing exponentially, because when this conversation started, we had 397 services. So at the rate at which data is growing, privacy is one thing, which is already being managed through a framework, but the thing is, every time it becomes more and more of a challenge to create reports that make sense out of this. And OpenAI, we've seen, is a potential use case to then mine that data and give results that make a lot of sense for government to make decisions. So that then maybe we are busy trying to focus to offer a service in an area where it is either not used or not required, and maybe we may need to spend less effort there and move those efforts to areas where there's more need for it. So we see potential use cases, especially for OpenAI, and then harness it into some of the solutions we have as government, so that then it makes sense for our citizens out there, because our key focus is how are we providing these services to our persons out there. Because remember one thing, there are parts of the population who say when you take these services online, you have discriminated against us, because either A, I cannot see, B, I cannot hear. So how are we then catering for these people? And we then foresee AI coming in to be a potential use case for this. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Michael. I'm so delighted to hear that. We know we're going into multi-language. We're building potentially local models that are going to work in our languages. And more importantly, really bringing AI to bring us closer to the citizen in terms of services and also adding value to their lives. I'd like to come back to you, Imran. In fact, we're just going to wrap up with these last two questions. And I'm trying to understand, Fortinet obviously has a global footprint. You provide a world-class range of products and services. How are we customizing or making these relevant to our African markets in a way that is cognizant of our unique situations?
Okay, thanks, Moses. I think one of the strategies we've taken as Fortinet East Africa and Kenya is we started with the education side of cybersecurity. So when we kicked off 9 years ago, everyone was only investing in antivirus. So that was the thing to buy. But we then had to sit back and say, why are we not investing in cybersecurity? And we suddenly found ourselves teaching rather than creating solutions for our customers. So the first 4 years of Fortinet East Africa, we simply had to spend a lot of time within governments to educate users on the need for cybersecurity, the importance of cybersecurity. All of a sudden it took off, and what we found is that every organization within government has a very unique case. So if you're addressing NTSA, they're more interested in data protection, they're interested in privacy, they're interested in make sure that the experience between the user's device and their application is secure, and it's the right person actually accessing the application. And you go over to lands, it's a completely different use case. And what we found is whatever Kenya seems to be doing, we seem to be replicating this across East Africa. One of our most successful use cases in Kenya is judiciary. And so we helped the judiciary accelerate the digital judiciary, and it's now up and running. You can get your notifications on SMS. You can sit through small claims courts online using Microsoft Teams. And it's been a complete transformation how judiciary is doing their business in Kenya. We're running similar programs now we're creating a similar use case in Rwanda, in Uganda, in Tanzania, Ethiopia. So Kenya sort of seems to be a bit of a benchmark for most of the East African countries, primarily because we are first adopters. We're the first to go with Huduma, we're the first to go with eCitizen. And what happens is the other regional countries come in and want to benchmark and see what was your learning experience in this whole thing. Like I said earlier, I think within government now, cybersecurity is becoming a priority. And without you know, the main thing we're seeing now is more investments coming in. We're seeing more use cases and asks coming in from government customers around how can they adopt cybersecurity. And they've gone beyond just buying a firewall. They want more advanced technologies that are machine learning, AI ready, to be able to help them reduce the threat landscape, be able to respond quicker. One of the things we're doing now is introducing our generative AI into our platforms, and we are now showcasing to our customers its ability to reduce threat hunting and mediation from 30 days to under an hour. So, you know, the government customer is now paying close attention to this because you are the single largest custodian of citizen data. And unfortunately, at the moment, in Kenya, data is all over the place, but the way I see it, it's eventually going to be consolidated into one place. And that's going to be a whole new challenge for how government handles and secures data across multiple platforms.
Thank you so much for that, Imran. I think, Kevin, you'll take our last question, just because there is another panel coming after us. For me, I think I'd like to hear for you, maybe it's a nice segue from where Imran has given us a perspective around Kenya and best practices on cybersecurity for the region. What are you seeing on a Pan-African basis when it comes to some of the cybersecurity threats? What sort of trends are we seeing, and how are these being addressed from a Cisco perspective?
Okay. Thank you for that. So the threats that we're actually seeing are more towards state-sponsored attacks. I mean, Kenya, we've actually been victim of one of those, and as Mheshimiwa so eloquently put it, because we are adopting technologies so much faster than normal, you find things like M-Pesa are quite critical. So last year, we had a DDoS attack on our M-Pesa systems and our APIs, and I remember the whole country, we had issues transacting. That actually was, that loss of availability meant that a lot of industries couldn't run as normal. So what Cisco is doing with regards to that is we are actually developing a platform, an end-to-end cybersecurity platform that is able to ingest all the data from the multiple telemetry sources that we're getting. And then based on that, and using artificial intelligence, we are able to sift through that data and give you high-fidelity alerts that you should action on. And over and above that, we're also bringing in the point of automation. So if there are actually, if there are responses that you take and steps that you take every time you see a certain cyber threat, then that can actually be tied into your full process. One of the largest investments that Cisco has done recently, and I think we spoke about this in the Speaker's Lounge, has been the investment of buying Splunk. Splunk is a large AI company. They are able to ingest lots of data and analyze that, and it's over a $30 billion investment. And with that, then we're bringing it into a platform. And what we'll eventually have, and because what you're seeing is every time you have a new cyber threat, what most industries end up doing is you get a tool or a mitigation for that threat. Then at the end of it, you have maybe 20 siloed solutions, best in class, but you're not able to ingest that data across. You're not able to tell what's a false positive or what's an actual high fidelity threat that you should action. So with these investments that Cisco is taking, together with the user education that you're doing, we end up leading to areas when cyber resiliency is going to be the focus. and responding to these issues is going to take so much less time than is currently going on.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. Unfortunately, due to time, we can't really go into questions from yourselves. We'll have to bring this to a close. I'd like to thank all our panelists for their contributions. It's been a great honor to be part of this panel. And again, from the audience, please give them a hand for being
Moses,
such an
if
engaging.
you would allow me,
Yes.
if you would allow me, I would probably just put in a last word in
Okay.
closing. And the topic was covering an aspect of threat and cybersecurity. And to my mind, there are quite a number of levels of threats which also present as opportunities. Of course, it was said here earlier that Africa is trying to find its place in this whole business of AI. And this connected summit being in Africa, maybe it's a time we have this conversation as to what Africa's contribution is going to be, so that data representation becomes a conversation that we step up to the highest level possible, so that even as regulation is being developed, even in the global platforms, whether we are talking about charters, resolutions that are internationally going to be developed, that presents as an opportunity for Africa to cede in its voice at the very nascent and early stages. Secondly, the biggest threat would, of course, be the threat to humanity and to humanness. So for us, even as we sit in a technological conference, we've always got to remind ourselves of the place of the human in that technology. And I'll use again the example of the representation that was done by Hani. When he got up on stage, first of all, we were wowed by how he presented himself with the technology. But devoid of Hani on stage, that presentation would not have made sense. So for us, it's to look for places where we are protecting by developing, so that it is as P.S. Tanui said, it is safety and security by design. And that will have all the levels of self-regulation, the levels of industry regulation, the levels of government regulation, legislations, policy, and all this. But ultimately, quite a good conference and a good summit. And glad that we are having it in Africa. And allow me to give a shout out. My minister has just walked in, who is shepherding the program that I talked about, the digital superhighway in Kenya, is under the purview and supervision of none other than Waziri Eliud Owalo, who is doing an amazing job. Thank you very much, Moses.
Thank you so much for the contribution. We appreciate it. And karibu sana, Eliud. So thank you so much, everyone on the panel. We'll bring this to a close.